Jean-Pierre Polnareff's Silver Chariot is a stand that has been made somewhat famous for its amazing speed, with it being able to assault targets with a barrage of blows on par with stands such as Star Platinum, or even being able to take off its own armor to increase how fast it can go. And in this armorless form, it has such incredible feats of speed such as being able to create after images, or appearing in two places at the same time. Though some of Silver Chariot's other speed-based feats that people know of may actually be more chalked up to Polnareff's own skill as a swordsman and his precision with his stand, allowing him to more outthink his opponents who are faster than him. But for the most part, Silver Chariot is unrivaled in its speed, which left me curious to find out just how fast is Silver Chariot anyways. So before we can begin to lab out Silver Chariot's actual speed, we need to address the elephant in the room. His speed has actually been called into question a few times by readers throughout the series due to a couple of scenes, two in particular standing out in people's minds as they take place in the same arc. One in which Polnareff tries but fails to slice Hull Horse's stand bullet, even though he had his armor off at the time, which so happens to happen during the same arc where Polnareff seemingly cuts at the speed of light with his armor on. These appear to be complete inconsistencies on the part of Araki, but this is only true if you view them without their full context. So let's view them within their context, starting first with the most egregious claim, that being, Silver Chariot is faster or as fast as the speed of light. He's not. Far from it, actually. But you might ask then, how is Polnareff able to cut Hangman, as Hangman moves at the speed of light? Well, it's actually explained by Polnareff himself, as he isn't really attacking, but more positioning himself correctly to slice Hangman while he's on a very predictable direct path to the next reflective surface that he needs to go to, which is somewhat of a trivial task for Silver Chariot and Polnareff given their amazing precision. So lining up this needlepoint attack to something that you know is coming in a direct pattern ain't too difficult. So as long as Polnareff knows where the stand will go, he can easily move into position, even with Chariot's armor on, before Hangman is forced to move to the next surface. So this was more Polnareff outthinking Hangman's own weakness, and not him moving faster than the speed of light, since doing that is literally impossible. Also, some people claim that Silver Chariot was able to keep up or nearly outpace Star Platinum, who in Part 6 is claimed to be able to attack at the speed of light. What people fail to mention with this is that both Silver Chariot's attacks were physically enhanced by Anubis' ability, which also made Polnareff the human as fast as Star Platinum, because it simply just matches up against the speed of its opponent, but also Jotaro was explicitly holding back in this fight. He makes mention of it himself, so no, Silver Chariot is not faster or as fast as the speed of light. So with that understood, it makes the scene with Hull Horse outmaneuvering Silver Chariot a little bit less jarring, though not much more. We'll get into that in a second. But this scene does help us with one thing. Polnareff was confident enough to challenge a bullet head-on, which leads us to understand that he believes that Silver Chariot possesses a speed greater than that of a bullet, though assumedly only with its armor off, as he points out specifically that he needs to take his armor off, though Polnareff didn't know what kind of bullet or firepower Hull Horse was packing, so he had to make a rough estimation based on Hull Horse's and his gun's appearance. And with that said, Hull Horse looks like a modern-day cowboy, so with that, Polnareff likely assumed that he was dealing with bullets on the level of a 357 Magnum, which clocks in at a speed of roughly around 500 meters per second, or a little under 1100 miles per hour. So working off of that, logically Silver Chariot must be working under those parameters or beyond with his armor off, and oh boy, does it go beyond that. Though before we do too deep a dive on armorless Silver Chariot, we should still respect the rather impressive armored version, as it is able to still block laser-based projectiles from the sun, though the measurement of one's speed isn't solely based on the reaction time or how fast they can throw a punch, but more so how quickly they can get from one place to another. And Silver Chariot, with both its armor on and off, have had some very impressive feats of speed. As I mentioned, during his fight with Avdol, he demonstrated possibly the most impressive act in the entire series, which was when he was dashing around faster than the human eye could see, all the while creating a multitude of after images to distract from his actual attacks that were happening at that incredible speed. And for us to fully grasp the speed on display here, we must first determine a few things, starting first with the radius of Silver Chariot's movement. So going out from Polnareff, we'll say that Silver Chariot has a maximum distance of 10 meters, or 32 feet, which is rather generous actually for a close-range stand like Silver Chariot, who only has a C in range, which is the same as Star Platinum, but we have seen Polnareff send him out further than the normal Star Platinum attack. So we're gonna work with 10 meters. With that in mind, this gives Polnareff a 10-meter circumference, meaning that Silver Chariot can go out from Polnareff in 10 meters in any direction at its maximum speed. And using the anime as reference for movement, with Silver Chariot's armor on, he clocks in about 13 meters a second to 30 miles per hour. And this calculation comes from him moving his maximum distance in under a second, around 0.77 of a second. Now, do you think that's a little underwhelming? Well, it's kind of heavy armor, so that's sort of the point. But when that armor comes off, that's when things get really goofy. So with his armor off, Silver Chariot has demonstrated to be fast enough that he stops being perceived by the human eye, meaning that he is moving at his maximum distance at around 1/220th to 1/250th a second, since those are the speeds that objects stop being registered by the human eye based on speed tests run on Air Force pilots. Which means, moving at this assumed maximum speed, Silver Chariot would be zooming around at roughly 13,800 to 15,700 meters a second, or nearly 31 to 35,000 miles per hour, which is well over 40 times the speed of sound and greater than the escape velocity of the Earth, which is roughly 11,186 meters a second. And this is such a ridiculous amount of speed that it makes the whole after image thing seem like such a trivial task in comparison. But for it to look like it does, it still requires some input by Polnareff and Chariot. The very visible after images that appear in the anime and manga wouldn't be like that if Silver Chariot was just moving at its maximum speed, because they would be a lot more blurred. So, for Chariot to create these very crisp after images, he would need to move to a location, stop, then instantaneously pick up to its maximum speed again as it moves to another location and then stops there, all the while within the 40 millisecond period in which the human eye registers an image and then transfers it to the brain. And given that stands don't adhere to the same laws of physics as humans do, this is actually entirely possible. And on top of that, with the speed displayed by Chariot, he could achieve this feat of extreme speed at least 1,380 times within a human's perception, which would create what looks like an army of Silver Chariots. So with that all understood, one might ask, why is there such a drastic difference between the two speeds of Silver Chariot? Well, it's likely because Araki didn't think this all the way through, at least down to the exact measurements. Because, of course, he shouldn't have to. Stands are basically magic, so you shouldn't have to lab things out like this when working on them. Because when Silver Chariot doesn't have its armor on, it's about as fast as it needs to be in any given situation. And there are even plenty of moments where, with his armor on, Silver Chariot still has impressive bursts of speed. Even Polnareff got to be really fast under the control of Anubis. Because, at the end of the day, how fast Silver Chariot exactly isn't really important. What's important is that he is understood to be fast. Though it is always fun to try and lab stuff like this out, because when you look at other scenes, they become a little silly, like how I mentioned earlier how the whole standoff between Whole Horse and Polnareff was made a little less ridiculous by the fact that Polnareff was slower than the speed of light. It's not all that much better with how fast he actually is, because Polnareff explicitly removes Chariot's armor to gain the maximum speed needed to cut the bullet. And while he probably wasn't going the maximum 13,500 meters a second, he was still going very fast, and even then, Whole Horse mentally redirects the bullet of the Emperor to weave around the saber. This says so much about Whole Horse. I mean, fuck being the fastest gun in the West, Whole Horse has to have some of the best reaction time in the whole goddamn world to do an attack like that. Dude should just give up stand battles, stop being a mercenary, pick up speedrunning, my guy. You'll put the TASes to shame. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. This is a topic that I thought would be a lot of fun to cover, and I hope it was fun for you to listen to. And if you want to see more videos like in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/MiniNotTheBadGuy. Patreon is a very helpful tool. It helps support this channel and keeps it flowing. And if you want to see how fast you can get, and see if you can even match up with the speeds of Silver Chariot, well, you can do so by buying a copy of Shimonetta, A Boring World Where the Concept of Dirty Jokes Doesn't Exist at buyshimonetta.com.